Friends, welcome to today's video. If you want to watch the super hit movie Wolfman, 2025, in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, make sure to subscribe so you never miss updates on the latest movies and entertainment news. Today's video is dedicated to one of the most anticipated films of the year, Wolfman, 2025. We will cover what this movie is about, how it was made, where you can watch it, and all the important behind-the-scenes details. From the technical aspects of filmmaking such as pre-production, filming, post-production, music, and editing, to the budget, box office, and the performances of the cast, everything will be discussed here in detail. Stay tuned until the very end of this video to get the full picture of Wolfman, 2025. Wolfman, 2025, is a horror thriller with dramatic undertones, produced under the banner of Universal Pictures. It is part of the continuing effort to revive the classic Universal monsters for a modern audience. The story draws inspiration from the traditional folklore of the werewolf and earlier cinematic versions of the Wolfman, but it brings a fresh take with updated storytelling, visual effects, and a darker atmosphere suited for contemporary viewers. The narrative is built around the main character who suffers from a curse, transforming into a wolf-like creature under specific conditions. The film explores themes of fear, isolation, survival, and the thin line between man and beast. The technical departments of Wolfman, 2025, play a very important role in shaping the film. Pre-production started years before filming began, with the script undergoing multiple rewrites to ensure it balanced horror with emotional drama. The production design team worked on creating environments that feel authentic yet eerie, from gothic mansions to dense forests, giving the audience an immersive experience. Costume designers contributed to the atmosphere with period-inspired clothing, while the makeup and special effects departments worked on achieving realistic transformations that pay homage to the practical effects of classic monster movies while using modern CGI to enhance the terror. Filming took place in a mix of studio sets and outdoor locations. The directors and cinematographers chose moody lighting and atmospheric settings to highlight the mystery and suspense. Many scenes were shot during nighttime or in dimly lit areas to capture the haunting tone of the story. The visual effects team invested significant time in crafting the werewolf sequences, ensuring the transformations appear both frightening and believable. The use of practical effects blended with CGI gives the movie a more grounded and raw feeling, unlike many purely digital horror films. Music also plays a vital role in Wolfman, 2025. The score mixes traditional orchestral themes with darker tones and suspenseful beats that heighten the sense of dread. The soundtrack has been carefully composed to match the pacing of the story, whether it is during slow-building tension or explosive action sequences. In horror cinema, music often creates an emotional impact that visuals alone cannot achieve, and Wolfman continues this tradition. Post-production took months to complete. The editing team focused on maintaining suspense, trimming unnecessary scenes, and ensuring the pacing kept the audience engaged from start to finish. Sound design added layers of atmosphere, from the growls and howls of the beast to the eerie silence of tense moments. The color grading leaned toward darker shades, with blue and gray tones dominating to enhance the gothic horror setting. The budget of Wolfman, 2025, is considered fairly high compared to earlier monster films, as Universal invested heavily in special effects, marketing, and top-tier cast members. Early predictions suggest that it has strong potential at the box office, especially given the fan base for monster-themed horror and the popularity of the lead actors. Universal has been keen to ensure this film not only entertains horror fans but also appeals to general audiences who enjoy suspenseful thrillers. Now let us talk about the cast and performances. The lead role is played by a renowned actor who brings depth and intensity to the character of the cursed man. His performance balances fear, rage, and humanity, allowing viewers to sympathize with his struggle while still fearing his monstrous transformation. Supporting actors add strength to the story, portraying family members, love interests, and those caught in the tragic chain of events. Standout moments include emotionally charged dialogues, chilling transformations, and thrilling confrontations with those who seek to destroy the Wolfman. The chemistry between the characters enhances the overall storytelling, making it more than just a horror spectacle. The concise story overview revolves around the life of a man who discovers he is cursed after a mysterious incident. As the full moon rises, he unwillingly transforms into a terrifying beast. Struggling to control his nature and protect the people he loves, he faces both internal battles and external threats from those who want him eliminated. The story combines emotional drama with shocking horror moments, leaving the audience both terrified and intrigued. In terms of review, early responses from critics and audiences highlight the film's strong visuals, haunting score, and powerful performances. Some praise the balance of horror and emotion, while others admire the respect paid to the original Wolfman legacy. The pacing keeps viewers engaged, and the scares feel genuine rather than forced. While the film may not be suitable for very young audiences due to its dark themes, it is expected to be a major attraction for horror fans worldwide. To sum it up, Wolfman, 2025, delivers a thrilling horror experience with high-quality production, gripping performances, and a storyline that mixes old folklore with modern storytelling. If you are a fan of monster movies or simply enjoy suspenseful cinema, this is a film worth watching. Do not miss out on experiencing this movie in theaters for the full impact. Watch it till the end, and share your thoughts once you have seen it. Wolfman, 2025, is a modern horror reboot directed by Lee Hoannell that reimagines the classic werewolf myth as an intense family drama combined with body horror. The film stars Christopher Abbott as Blake Lovell, Julia Garner as his wife Charlotte, Matilda Firth as their daughter Ginger, and Sam Yeager as Blake's estranged father Grady. The supporting cast includes Benedict Hardy and Ben Prendergast in important roles that help shape the narrative. The story opens with a chilling prologue set in the mid-1990s, where a hiker mysteriously disappears in the remote Oregon hills. The local community whispers about strange attacks and a sickness that spreads like a virus from wild animals. This sets the stage for the central theme of inherited danger and a haunting legacy that will resurface decades later. The main story takes place 30 years after the opening. Blake Lovell is introduced as a struggling writer and stay-at-home father living in San Francisco. His marriage with Charlotte, a dedicated investigative journalist, is under strain, and his relationship with his daughter Ginger is tender but distant. The turning point comes when Blake learns that his father Grady has been declared dead, and Blake inherits the old family farmhouse in rural Oregon. Hoping to clear out his father's belongings and perhaps reconnect with his roots, Blake convinces Charlotte and Ginger to make the trip with him. Upon arriving at the isolated farmhouse, the family quickly senses that something is wrong. One night they are attacked by a violent, unseen creature in the surrounding woods. Blake is injured during the struggle, leaving the family terrified and forcing them to barricade themselves inside the farmhouse. As hours pass, it becomes clear that the threat is not only external. Blake begins to suffer from strange symptoms. His wounds heal unusually fast, his senses sharpen, and his behavior becomes increasingly erratic. At first Charlotte believes he is simply suffering trauma from the attack, but soon the truth becomes unavoidable. Blake is not recovering, he is changing. His transformation into a werewolf is gradual and terrifying, portrayed with a mix of practical effects and subtle digital enhancements. This slow metamorphosis gives the story a deeply unsettling atmosphere, allowing viewers to witness both the physical horror and the emotional breakdown of a man losing his humanity. Charlotte finds herself in a desperate position. As an investigative journalist, she is trained to search for truth, but nothing in her career has prepared her for the nightmare unfolding before her eyes. Her love for Blake clashes with her fear of what he is becoming. Protecting her daughter Ginger becomes her sole focus as she struggles to understand whether Blake can be saved or whether he has become the very monster that now stalks them from within their own home. Flashbacks reveal Blake's troubled childhood with Grady, played by Sam Yeager. The audience sees how Blake grew up under a harsh and often violent father, and how generational trauma shaped his adult life. These memories are important because they parallel Blake's current situation. Just as he once feared his father's cruelty, his daughter now fears what he is turning into. Grady's presence in the story lingers like a shadow, making the narrative not only about a literal monster but also about cycles of fear and destruction passed from parent to child. Supporting characters, including Derek and a few locals who remember the strange disappearances of the past, add depth to the story. They provide insight into the history of the werewolf legend in the region and offer contrasting perspectives. Some seek to destroy the creature at any cost, while others sympathize with Blake's tragic fate. The performances elevate the film. Christopher Abbott portrays Blake with an unsettling intensity, shifting from fragile vulnerability to terrifying rage as the transformation overtakes him. Julia Garner delivers a layered performance as Charlotte, conveying strength, fear, and determination to protect her child. Matilda Firth's portrayal of Ginger adds emotional weight, showing the innocence caught in the middle of terror. Sam Yeager's Grady is a looming presence, embodying the generational cycle of violence that underpins the entire narrative. The film builds to a tense climax where the line between man and beast is fully erased. Charlotte and Ginger must make impossible choices as Blake's transformation completes. The final moments are left deliberately ambiguous, keeping the audience in suspense about whether Blake is entirely gone or if some trace of humanity remains. Wolfman, 2025, is not just about a monster, it is about family, legacy, and the fear of becoming what you most dread. The story combines gothic atmosphere with psychological depth, making it more than a traditional horror film. It balances intimate domestic drama with shocking horror sequences, leaving viewers unsettled and emotionally invested. For fans of monster cinema and slow-burn psychological thrillers, Wolfman, 2025, offers a chilling and unforgettable experience. Wolfman, 2025, opens with a dark and eerie prologue set in the Oregon wilderness in the mid-1990s. The first image is of a lone hiker entering dense woods at dusk. The scene is quiet at first, then unsettling sounds grow in the background until the hiker disappears violently, leaving behind only broken branches and echoes of a growl. This cold open sets the tone of mystery and horror while introducing the legend of a creature that haunts the area. It also plants a seed of unease that will connect to the film's central family decades later. The setup shifts to the present day in San Francisco, where we meet Blake Lovell, played by Christopher Abbott. Blake is a struggling writer, isolated and weighed down by a sense of failure. His wife Charlotte, played by Julia Garner, is a determined investigative journalist, and together they are raising their young daughter Ginger, portrayed by Matilda Firth. Early scenes establish the tension within their marriage, hinting that Charlotte's career focus and Blake's lack of direction have created a rift. The family dynamic is loving but fragile. The inciting incident arrives when Blake learns that his estranged father Grady, played by Sam Yeager, is presumed dead and that Blake has inherited his childhood farmhouse in Oregon. Despite Charlotte's hesitation, Blake insists they should go to clear the house and perhaps find a way to reconnect as a family. The rising action begins as they travel to Oregon and settle into the farmhouse. At first the trip feels like a fresh start, but tension simmers. Blake's memories of his father and his childhood surface through small flashbacks that reveal an abusive and secretive home environment. One night, while exploring the surrounding woods, the family is attacked by a savage animal. Blake is badly wounded but survives. The attack shifts the story sharply, as the family retreats indoors, barricading themselves from a danger they cannot fully see or understand. The first major turning point comes as Blake begins to heal unnaturally fast. His wound closes overnight, his senses sharpen, and his behavior grows increasingly unpredictable. Charlotte notices him snapping at her and Ginger in ways he never did before. His body temperature rises, his eyes take on an unnatural glow in dim light, and he begins experiencing vivid hallucinations and strange urges. At this point the narrative makes it clear that the external monster may not be the only threat, the horror is now inside the house. The film builds its midsection with deliberate tension. The narrative remains mostly linear but uses strategic flashbacks to Blake's youth with Grady, drawing parallels between father and son. These glimpses show the harshness of Grady's parenting, suggesting that Blake has always feared turning into his father. Now, that fear takes a literal shape as his transformation into the Wolfman accelerates. A crucial mid-film turn comes when Charlotte realizes the creature outside may in fact be connected to Blake's family curse, and Blake himself might become the monster that destroyed others. This revelation pivots the story from survival horror into a tragic family drama. The emotional peak arrives when Charlotte must confront Blake directly after he nearly harms Ginger during a fit of rage. In a tense scene, Charlotte locks Blake in a room as he begs her for help, his voice breaking between human fear and animal growls. This moment lands hard because it blurs love and terror, forcing Charlotte to choose between saving her husband or protecting her child. The narrative here underscores the theme of transformation not only in body but in relationships. Once trust is broken, it cannot be restored. As the climax approaches, the full transformation takes hold. The finale is set during a stormy night when Blake, no longer able to control himself, becomes the Wolfman. The family home becomes a battleground. Charlotte and Ginger attempt to escape while Blake, now a monstrous figure, tears through walls and furniture in a mix of fury and anguish. The editing heightens the chaos, alternating between Charlotte's desperate attempts to save her daughter and Blake's violent yet tragic breakdown. The final beat is deliberately ambiguous. Charlotte and Ginger flee into the forest, while Blake, momentarily regaining a flicker of humanity, chooses not to pursue them. Instead, he retreats into the darkness of the woods, leaving his fate unresolved. The last image mirrors the opening. The same forest, the same haunting silence, but now infused with the knowledge that the monster is no longer legend, it is someone's father and husband. The narrative choices in Wolfman, 2025, are carefully constructed to intensify the emotional stakes. By keeping the story mostly linear but weaving in short flashbacks, the film creates a layered understanding of Blake's character and the generational cycle of fear. The decision to show the transformation slowly, rather than as a sudden event, allows the audience to feel the creeping dread along with Charlotte and Ginger. The deliberate pacing in the first half builds sympathy, so that when Blake loses his humanity, it feels devastating rather than purely horrific. The film also leaves deliberate gaps for interpretation. It never fully explains whether Blake's curse is supernatural, viral, or psychological, allowing the audience to wrestle with the ambiguity. Was he doomed by family legacy, or could it have been prevented? These unanswered questions make the story linger in the mind long after the credits roll. In summary, the plot of Wolfman 2025 follows a clear arc: the setup of a fractured family, the inciting incident of the inheritance, the rising action with the attack and strange symptoms, the mid-film turn revealing the internal monster, the emotional peak of confrontation, and the finale of tragic transformation and ambiguous escape. Each beat is designed not only to move the story forward, but to deepen our understanding of the characters and their fears. By balancing horror spectacle with intimate drama, the narrative ensures that Wolfman is more than a creature feature. It is a story about family, legacy, and the terror of losing control. Character development in Wolfman, 2025, is the driving force that elevates the story from being a straightforward horror film to an emotionally layered exploration of family, fear, and transformation. Each major character is written and performed in a way that reflects not only their personal arc, but also the larger themes of legacy, control, and survival. By the end of the film, the audience feels the weight of their changes, or in some cases, their inability to change at all. Blake Lovell, played by Christopher Abbott, is the protagonist and the tragic center of the film. At the start, Blake is presented as a man drifting through life, struggling with his identity as a father and husband. He is a writer with ambitions that have never been fulfilled, and this unspoken failure haunts him. What he wants, more than anything, is to reclaim a sense of purpose and prove to himself and his family that he can still be someone they can depend on. The obstacle in his way is not just his estrangement from his father or the inheritance of the farmhouse. It is his own insecurity and the growing curse inside him. His arc is carefully constructed through subtle beats. Early in the film, there is a moment when Blake pauses to watch Charlotte and Ginger laughing together. He smiles, but then quickly looks away, the gesture revealing his distance from the closeness he longs to share. As the story unfolds, his transformation into the Wolfman becomes a physical manifestation of his inner struggle. He wants to protect his family but increasingly becomes the threat they fear most. His journey is ultimately a tragic regression rather than growth. By the end, he does show one final flicker of humanity in the choice not to harm them during the climax, but the arc is framed as a man consumed by forces he cannot control. Charlotte, played by Julia Garner, undergoes one of the most significant arcs in the film. At the beginning, she is a dedicated journalist, strong-willed and practical, but her marriage feels strained because she is often more focused on her career than her husband's emotional needs. Her initial goal is to keep her family together, though she underestimates how serious their problems are. The farmhouse trip is meant as a chance to reconnect, but when Blake is attacked, her priorities shift. She transitions from trying to maintain family harmony to becoming a fierce protector of her daughter. Key moments show her evolution. In one scene, she quietly tells Blake that they will be okay, even as her expression betrays deep fear, revealing the conflict between reassurance and reality. Another pivotal beat is when she locks Blake away during his near-violent outburst. This moment is not just about safety, it represents her acceptance that her husband may already be gone. By the end, Charlotte's arc is one of strength and resolve. She has moved from being a partner trying to save a marriage to a mother making impossible choices for survival. Her growth is shown through action rather than words, and she emerges as the emotional anchor of the film. Ginger, played by Matilda Firth, represents innocence caught in the middle of horror. At the start, she is a child who simply wants her parents to stop fighting and to feel safe in their company. Her small gestures, like holding Blake's hand even when Charlotte pulls her away, show her need to believe in her father. As Blake changes, Ginger's arc becomes one of disillusionment. She begins to realize that the person she loves most may no longer exist in the same way. A subtle line where she whispers, "Daddy sounds different," highlights her growing awareness. By the end, she displays resilience, clutching her mother's hand as they escape, a sign that she has been forced to grow up far too quickly. Grady, Blake's father played by Sam Yeager, functions more as a looming shadow than a traditional antagonist, but his presence shapes much of the story. In flashbacks, he is portrayed as harsh and emotionally distant, leaving Blake with deep scars. Grady represents generational trauma and the fear of inheriting one's worst traits. His character does not evolve in the present story, but his legacy pushes Blake's arc into motion. The audience is left to interpret whether Blake's curse is literal or symbolic of becoming his father. In this way, Grady's static nature serves a thematic purpose. He embodies the unchanging threat of inherited fear. Supporting characters such as Derek and locals who recall past disappearances provide exposition and perspective, but they are not mere window dressing. Each interaction with them challenges the main characters to confront reality. Derek, for example, warns Blake about the dangers of staying in the farmhouse, creating tension between loyalty and denial. While these side characters do not undergo significant arcs of their own, their inclusion grounds the story and enriches the main character's development. The antagonist in Wolfman, 2025, is less a single character and more a combination of forces: the external creature, the curse within Blake, and the legacy of his father. This layered antagonism keeps the conflict deeply personal. It is not simply about defeating a monster, it is about whether the characters can survive the collapse of their own family. By the end of the film, the arcs of the characters converge around one theme: loss. Blake loses his humanity, Charlotte loses her husband but gains the strength to protect her daughter, Ginger loses her innocence but gains resilience, and Grady's shadow remains unbroken. The subtle beats, a glance, a gesture, a whispered line, ensure the changes feel authentic. The character development is what gives Wolfman its emotional power, transforming it from a horror spectacle into a story about identity, love, and the terror of becoming something you cannot escape. The performances in Wolfman, 2025, are among the film's strongest assets, blending subtle craft with raw intensity. Ryan Gosling, taking on the lead role of Larry Talbot, delivers one of his most commanding performances to date. Known for his ability to balance quiet vulnerability with explosive emotion, Gosling brings a layered humanity to a character torn between his human morality and his monstrous instincts. From the first act, his physical stillness and restrained delivery suggest a man carrying a heavy burden. Small details, such as the way his voice falters when speaking about his daughter or the trembling in his hands before a transformation, anchor Larry in an emotional reality. Gosling's work is not just about big outbursts of rage, but about the quieter moments where his humanity tries to surface. His performance thrives on contrasts: calm versus chaos, love versus violence, and that duality makes the character compelling. Christoph Waltz, cast as the enigmatic figure hunting Larry, injects the story with a chilling precision. Waltz's mastery of dialogue delivery makes every line drip with menace and charisma. He approaches the antagonist role not with brute force but with psychological intensity, creating a character who believes his actions are justified. His scenes with Gosling play like a chess match, each word carrying an undercurrent of manipulation or provocation. Waltz's subtle smiles and pauses between words amplify the tension, making him a magnetic presence who elevates even expository dialogue. He manages to embody both authority and danger without ever raising his voice, which makes his final confrontation with Gosling even more explosive. Emily Blunt plays Gwen, a character whose role balances between emotional anchor and moral compass. Blunt has a natural ability to portray strength and empathy simultaneously, and in Wolfman she brings that quality to full effect. Her chemistry with Gosling is palpable, particularly in the scenes where Gwen tries to remind Larry of the man he was before the curse took over. Blunt avoids the trap of playing a typical damsel or love interest. Instead, she imbues Gwen with her own agency and inner conflict. Her scenes with Gosling are often the emotional centerpieces, grounding the supernatural horror in deeply human stakes. In one particularly powerful moment, Gwen touches Larry's face as he resists transformation, whispering words of comfort. The sincerity in her delivery, paired with the quiet desperation in her eyes, transforms what could have been melodrama into a heartbreaking beat of connection. Supporting roles also add depth to the film. Sam Worthington, as a skeptical police officer drawn into Larry's orbit, surprises with a measured and thoughtful performance. Worthington leans into weariness and suspicion rather than brute action, and his moments of realization about the true nature of the monster feel authentic. Anthony Ramos, playing a journalist determined to uncover the truth, injects energy and curiosity into the narrative. His quick wit and sharp timing give the film moments of relief without undercutting the darker tone. Ramos especially shines in his early exchanges with Gosling, as his probing questions unsettle Larry and subtly foreshadow the revelation of his secret. Even smaller supporting turns make an impression. A brief but memorable appearance by a young actress as Larry's daughter adds an emotional core to his struggle. Her innocence and warmth contrast sharply with his violent nature, and the chemistry between her and Gosling is heartfelt. Their scenes provide a vital reminder of what Larry stands to lose, and the child's natural performance prevents those moments from feeling overly sentimental. The performances succeed largely because the cast treats the horror material with sincerity. Rather than winking at the genre or exaggerating emotions, the actors ground their portrayals in truth. Timing and physicality become as important as dialogue. Gosling's hunched posture before a transformation conveys as much as any line, while Blunt's firm but tender gestures reinforce her character's strength. Even Waltz's measured stillness speaks volumes, his calm body language contrasting with the chaos around him. That said, not every performance is flawless. Some minor supporting players lean too heavily into archetypes, such as the fearful villagers or the overzealous scientist, whose exaggerated delivery can feel out of sync with the film's otherwise grounded tone. These moments are brief but noticeable, slightly disrupting the immersion. Still, they are outweighed by the richness of the central cast. In the end, Wolfman thrives because of the way its actors breathe life into archetypes that could easily have felt familiar. Gosling makes Larry tragic and terrifying in equal measure, Blunt provides emotional resonance, Waltz crafts a villain with unsettling elegance, and the supporting cast fills the world with believable texture. Together, they transform a classic monster tale into a character-driven story where every gesture, every pause, and every shared look matters. The film lingers in memory not only for its horror but because the performances make the monster and the man equally unforgettable. The direction of Wolfman, 2025, is central to why the film feels both contemporary and rooted in the Gothic traditions of classic horror. Directed by Lee Hownell, known for his sharp eye and blending atmosphere with tension, the movie carries a distinct visual and tonal identity that makes it stand out from other modern monster films. Hownell approaches the story not as a simple creature feature but as a deeply psychological tale, and his choices in pacing, camera movement, and staging all serve to underline that vision. From the opening sequence, his intent is clear. This is not a campy reimagining but a grounded and emotionally intense exploration of duality, fear, and humanity. One of Hownell's most noticeable stylistic signatures in Wolfman is his use of camera movement to mirror the protagonist's state of mind. In the early scenes, when Larry Talbot is still clinging to his fragile humanity, Hownell uses steady tracking shots and measured pacing. The camera lingers on small, quiet gestures, allowing the audience to absorb the tension beneath Larry's calm exterior. As the story progresses and the curse takes greater hold, the direction shifts noticeably. The camera becomes more erratic, employing sudden cuts, sharper angles, and disorienting close-ups that mimic Larry's descent into chaos. This shift is deliberate, not only heightening the sense of dread but also immersing the audience in the instability of the character's world. Hownell's approach to staging is equally precise. He favors wide frames that use shadow and space to create unease. The wolf transformations are rarely shown in full view at first, often staged partially in shadow or reflected through mirrors and windows. This choice builds suspense and plays on the audience's imagination, a nod to the old-school horror tradition where what is unseen is often more terrifying than what is shown. When the full transformations do occur, the staging becomes more intimate and claustrophobic, forcing the viewer into direct confrontation with the monstrous form. This shift from distance to closeness makes the reveal more impactful. Pacing is another key aspect of Hownell's direction. The first act of the film is deliberately slow, layering in character development and atmosphere before unleashing the chaos. This methodical build-up is risky in a genre where audiences sometimes expect immediate thrills, but Hownell uses it to his advantage. By the time the horror elements erupt, the emotional groundwork has been firmly laid, and the tension feels earned. Some viewers may find the slower stretches testing their patience, but the payoff is significant, as the careful pacing makes the climactic sequences all the more explosive. Hownell's handling of the actors shows a strong directorial hand as well. Ryan Gosling's performance benefits from a director who knows how to let silence speak as loudly as dialogue. Hownell frequently stages Gosling in frames where his isolation is visually reinforced. Long takes of Larry in dimly lit rooms, his face half hidden in shadow, or shots that place him at a physical distance from others. These choices allow Gosling's subtle work to shine, emphasizing the character's inner turmoil. Emily Blunt's scenes, meanwhile, are staged with more warmth and light, visually separating Gwen's humanity from Larry's darkness. These contrasts are not accidental. They are part of a directorial strategy to guide emotional interpretation without spelling it out explicitly. Howl also demonstrates a keen understanding of how to balance horror with drama. He does not overload the film with jump scares, instead opting for an atmosphere that builds unease through silence, sound design, and framing. The moments of violence, when they come, are swift and brutal, punctuating long stretches of tension. This restraint makes the horror sequences more effective, as they feel like shocking intrusions into an otherwise quiet, uneasy world. That said, not every directorial decision lands perfectly. Some of the action sequences in the third act rely on rapid editing and shaky camera work that can feel disorienting rather than immersive. While this style may be intended to convey the chaos of a wolf attack, it occasionally undermines the clarity of the scene. A few viewers may also feel that the film's commitment to atmosphere sometimes comes at the expense of momentum, particularly in the middle act where dialogue-heavy scenes slightly stall the narrative. These moments, however, are minor compared to the overall effectiveness of the direction. Perhaps the strongest element of Howl's vision is his ability to merge the psychological with the supernatural. The wolf is both literal and metaphorical, and the direction underscores this duality at every turn. Close-ups on Gosling's conflicted expressions, the interplay of light and shadow, and the juxtaposition of silence with sudden sound all work together to keep the film rooted in its thematic concerns. This careful balance ensures that the horror is never empty spectacle but always tied to the character's inner battle. In the end, Howl's direction shapes Wolfman into more than just a monster movie. His stylistic choices in pacing, staging, and guiding performances craft an experience that is immersive, unsettling, and emotionally resonant. While a few stylistic risks may divide audiences, the overall vision is confident and cohesive, giving the film its identity as both a modern thriller and a respectful nod to classic horror traditions. It is direction that treats the material with sincerity and ambition, turning a familiar monster into a story that feels both timeless and freshly alive. The cinematography of Wolfman, 2025, plays an essential role in shaping the movie's identity and emotional weight, elevating it far beyond the boundaries of a standard horror film. Directed visually by cinematographer Stefan Duccio, who previously worked with Lee Howl on The Invisible Man, the film's camera work combines atmosphere, psychological tension, and thematic depth into a consistent visual language. Rather than serving as a decorative layer, the cinematography is integral to how the story unfolds, guiding the audience through shifts in mood, tone, and character psychology. From the opening sequence, the film establishes its visual style with moody, low-lit frames that hint at what lies beneath the surface of the story. The opening images are quiet, relying on long, still takes that emphasize space and silence. Wide shots capture empty hallways, fog-filled landscapes, and moonlit forests, immediately setting the tone of isolation and unease. This use of space is not only atmospheric but also thematic. Larry Talbot is framed as a man adrift, surrounded by emptiness, suggesting his alienation from both society and himself. Color palettes are carefully chosen to reinforce the duality of the film. Cold blues, silvers, and grays dominate much of the cinematography, particularly in night scenes and transformation sequences, lending the film a chilling and almost metallic feel. These tones underline Larry's detachment and the supernatural menace of his condition. In contrast, warmer colors are reserved for Gwen's presence, family flashbacks, and moments of humanity. The warmth of gold and amber shades is often fleeting, but it creates a stark contrast with the otherwise icy palette, visually symbolizing what Larry risks losing as the wolf curse takes over. This balance between warmth and cold is not accidental. It mirrors the struggle between man and monster, love and destruction, humanity and savagery. Lighting plays a critical role in the visual storytelling. Duccio employs chiaroscuro techniques, using strong contrasts between light and shadow to heighten tension. Larry is often partially lit, his face divided between light and dark, a visual metaphor for his inner duality. In moments of transformation, flickering light sources such as lanterns, fireplaces, or moonlight through broken windows intensify the unease, suggesting instability and unpredictability. Shadows are used not just for atmosphere but also as narrative devices. At times, the wolf form is hinted at in distorted shadows before the creature is fully revealed, playing on the audience's imagination and fear of the unknown. Camera movement is another essential layer of the cinematography. Early scenes employ steady, almost patient movements, giving the sense of a controlled world where Larry is still able to maintain composure. As the story progresses and Larry begins losing control, the cinematography reflects this through more restless movement. Handheld shots, sudden pans, and quick shifts in perspective immerse viewers in Larry's chaotic experience. This deliberate evolution in camera technique mirrors the narrative arc, where order gives way to disorder, stability to frenzy. Framing choices throughout the film are equally telling. Wide shots are used extensively to convey scale and isolation. For example, scenes of Larry wandering through desolate forests or abandoned towns use wide framing to swallow the character in vast, ominous spaces, making him look small and vulnerable against forces beyond his control. On the other hand, tight close-ups capture moments of transformation or psychological breakdown, drawing attention to Gosling's expressive performance. The camera lingers on sweat, trembling hands, and darting eyes, ensuring that the audience feels Larry's internal struggle as viscerally as possible. Standout shots are plentiful, and many of them are composed to linger in memory long after the credits roll. One haunting image comes midway through the film, where Larry, half transformed, is seen standing in a ruined chapel. The broken stained glass casts fractured beams of moonlight across his face, symbolizing both divine judgment and his fractured humanity. Another striking sequence features Gwen approaching Larry in the forest, with the camera slowly pulling back to reveal the silhouette of the wolf form emerging behind him, creating tension without the need for dialogue. These visual moments are not just stylish but serve as storytelling tools that deepen the audience's emotional engagement. The cinematography also experiments with perspective to manipulate audience perception. In some sequences, the wolf is shown from Larry's subjective point of view, blurring the lines between predator and prey. Rapid shifts in focus, distorted lenses, and motion blur during chase scenes put the viewer inside the chaos of the hunt, heightening adrenaline and disorientation. In contrast, scenes shot from Gwen's perspective often feel steadier, grounded in warmer tones and more stable framing, visually reinforcing her role as the anchor to Larry's fading humanity. Importantly, the cinematography is never overbearing. While stylish, it avoids calling attention to itself for its own sake. Duccio's work is careful to support the narrative and emotional beats rather than overshadow them. The beauty of the cinematography lies in how seamlessly it integrates with the story, making it feel like a natural extension of the film's themes rather than a separate layer of artistry. In conclusion, the cinematography of Wolfman, 2025, is not merely decorative but essential to the film's power. Through careful use of framing, movement, lighting, and color palettes, Stefan Duccio creates a visual language that mirrors the protagonist's descent, underscores the central themes of duality and loss, and immerses the audience in a world that is both terrifying and beautiful. The images crafted here are not easily forgotten, cementing Wolfman as a film where the camera does more than record events. It shapes how we feel, what we fear, and what we remember. The editing and pacing of Wolfman, 2025, play a crucial role in shaping its emotional resonance, tension, and overall flow. Edited by Kurt Lewix, the film adopts a rhythm that aligns with its psychological core while still delivering the thrills expected from a modern horror thriller. The choices made in transitions, scene length, and structural rhythm define how the audience experiences the duality of the narrative. One part intimate character study, the other part suspense-driven monster film. The editing balances these modes with varying degrees of success, offering both moments of brilliance and occasional stretches where pacing becomes uneven. The film's first act is deliberately slow, a choice that might test impatient viewers but serves a clear purpose. Editing here is measured, with longer takes and smoother transitions that establish mood and character depth. Scenes often breathe, allowing silence and atmosphere to dominate rather than rushing forward. This restrained pacing mirrors Larry Talbot's fragile sense of control at the start of the story. Cross-cutting is used sparingly in these early moments, often to juxtapose Larry's solitary struggles with Gwen's more grounded world, reinforcing the emotional distance between them. The restraint pays off by the time the first transformation arrives, as the contrast between calm and chaos amplifies the tension. As the film moves into its second act, editing becomes more dynamic. Flashbacks are interwoven carefully to reveal layers of Larry's past, his troubled family history, the origins of the curse, and fractured relationships. These flashbacks are not presented as abrupt intrusions but are folded into the narrative through match cuts and dissolves, creating a sense of memory bleeding into present experience. This editing technique blurs the lines between reality and recollection, underscoring the instability of Larry's mind. At times, however, these memory fragments slightly disrupt pacing, as the flow of the main plot occasionally stalls for exposition. The intent is clear, to deepen the emotional resonance, but a few sequences could have been trimmed for efficiency. Suspense building relies heavily on cross-cutting, particularly in scenes where Gwen's search for answers runs parallel to Larry's struggle with transformation. These sequences highlight the strengths of the editing, as the alternating perspectives create tension by forcing the audience to wait for convergence. One standout example comes in the midpoint, where Larry's partial transformation during a village gathering is intercut with Gwen uncovering a journal that explains the curse. The parallel editing builds dread and inevitability, with the two narrative threads colliding in a burst of chaos. Montages are used sparingly but effectively. A training-style sequence of Larry attempting to control his urges is pieced together with quick cuts, emphasizing repetition and futility. The rhythm of the montage contrasts sharply with the otherwise deliberate pacing, offering a rare sense of acceleration. However, the film avoids overusing montages, maintaining focus on grounded narrative progression. This restraint reflects the director's preference for tension rooted in atmosphere rather than flashy editing tricks. The third act shifts into faster, more fragmented editing, reflecting the chaos unleashed by Larry's full transformation. Rapid-fire cuts, handheld sequences, and blurred motion dominate the climactic chase scenes. While this creates visceral immediacy, it occasionally sacrifices clarity. A few sequences feel disorienting, with action beats cut so tightly that spatial geography becomes difficult to follow. This stylistic choice mirrors Larry's loss of control, but it risks pulling viewers out of the moment if they struggle to piece together what is happening. A slightly steadier rhythm might have preserved both chaos and coherence. Silence and restraint remain powerful tools throughout the film. Lewis often allows scenes to stretch into stillness, relying on the absence of cuts to heighten tension. Long takes where Larry sits alone, struggling with his reflection, linger uncomfortably, letting the audience absorb his torment without distraction. This patience contrasts with the more frenetic editing of horror sequences, giving the film a dynamic rhythm that oscillates between calm and storm. These variations prevent monotony and keep the audience emotionally engaged, though the balance is not always perfect. One of the film's most effective editing strategies is its use of deliberate ellipses. Transformations are often hinted at rather than shown in full detail, with cuts obscuring the process until the aftermath. This withholding creates a sense of mystery and dread, as viewers are left to imagine what occurred in the gaps. Similarly, the film occasionally cuts away from climactic violence to focus on reactions, suggesting horror rather than showing it outright. This restraint enhances the psychological aspect of the story while allowing moments of brutality to feel more shocking when fully revealed. In terms of rhythm across acts, the film can be described as a crescendo structure. It begins slowly, gradually layering tension, then accelerates in intensity until the climactic release. While this design is effective, some viewers may find the second act slightly bloated, as repeated dialogue-heavy sequences about the curse slow down forward momentum. A tighter cut in this section could have maintained narrative clarity without sacrificing emotional depth. Overall, the editing of Wolfman, 2025, is thoughtful, deliberate, and deeply tied to character psychology. It trusts silence and atmosphere when necessary but also embraces rapid cutting in moments of chaos. Flashbacks and cross-cutting enrich the narrative, though they sometimes risk disrupting flow. The rhythm of the film mirrors Larry's journey from fragile control to uncontrollable frenzy, and while a few sequences might have benefited from a clearer edit, the overall structure serves the story well. By shaping time and tension with precision, the editing ensures that Wolfman is not just a horror spectacle but an immersive experience that feels both intimate and epic. The soundtrack and score of Wolfman, 2025, are integral to the film's emotional and psychological impact, shaping how the audience perceives the narrative and interacts with its characters. Scored by Marco Beltrami, whose experience in both horror and dramatic cinema makes him an apt choice, the music is not simply a background layer but a character of its own, guiding emotion, tension, and atmosphere. From its haunting opening motif to its use of silence in key moments, the score provides a constant undercurrent that elevates the storytelling while also reinforcing the film's themes of duality, tragedy, and fear. One of the most effective elements of the score is its use of recurring motifs. The main theme, a haunting string arrangement with deep, pulsing undertones, is introduced in the opening sequence and repeats throughout the film in various forms. Initially soft and melancholic, the theme conveys Larry Talbot's inner sorrow and isolation. As the story progresses, this motif evolves, sometimes distorted with harsher instrumentation during moments of transformation, sometimes stripped back to bare piano chords in moments of vulnerability. This adaptability allows the theme to serve as a musical representation of Larry's fractured identity, reminding the audience that beneath the terror of the Wolfman lies a man struggling against his fate. Character-driven motifs extend beyond Larry. Gwen's presence in the story is often accompanied by warmer orchestration, with gentle strings and woodwinds signaling moments of compassion and hope. These cues are subtle but meaningful, contrasting with the darker tonal palette that dominates much of the score. When Gwen and Larry share scenes together, the music often blends their motifs, creating bittersweet harmonies that emphasize both connection and looming tragedy. This careful layering ensures that the audience feels the emotional stakes not only through dialogue and performance but also through the sonic world of the film. The soundtrack's use of silence is another of its most powerful tools. Beltrami and Juanel make a deliberate choice to strip music away in moments of high tension, allowing ambient sounds, footsteps, breathing, rustling leaves, the distant howl of wind, to dominate. These moments create unease by denying the audience the emotional guidance that music often provides, leaving them suspended in uncertainty. When the score re-enters after such silences, the effect is amplified, hitting with greater emotional weight. One standout example is during Larry's first full transformation, where silence dominates until the crescendo of strings and percussion bursts forth, matching the terror of the moment with sonic ferocity. The film also incorporates bursts of licensed music sparingly but with memorable impact. A period-appropriate ballad plays during a village festival, providing a momentary sense of normalcy before chaos erupts. The cheerful tune is abruptly cut short by a violent transformation, making the contrast between music and horror even more jarring. These carefully chosen tracks serve as markers of the human world that Larry is steadily losing, grounding the supernatural elements in a recognizable reality. Tension is manipulated throughout the film by the score's rhythmic design. Low, droning tones build unease during stalking sequences, while sharp percussive bursts punctuate sudden moments of violence. The layering of sound mirrors the pacing of the film, slow builds, sudden peaks, and moments of quiet release. This ebb and flow ensures that the audience remains on edge, never quite able to settle into a rhythm of comfort. The unpredictability of the score reflects the unpredictability of the Wolfman himself, keeping tension alive even in seemingly calm scenes. There are standout scenes where the score transforms the experience entirely. One such moment occurs in the chapel, when Larry, half transformed, confronts Gwen under fractured moonlight. The score weaves together his dark motif and her warmer theme, clashing dissonantly before briefly resolving into a mournful harmony. The effect is heartbreaking, underscoring the tragedy of two people connected yet doomed by forces beyond their control. Without the score, the scene would still be powerful, but with it, the emotional depth becomes unforgettable. Another highlight comes during the finale, where the main theme swells into its fullest orchestral form, combining strings, brass, and choir to elevate the climax into something operatic, almost mythic in scale. That said, the score is not flawless. There are moments in the third act where the music slightly overplays its hand, particularly in action-heavy sequences where rapid editing is paired with an equally aggressive score. In these moments, the layering of pounding drums, soaring strings, and heavy brass risks overwhelming the visuals, making the chaos feel less precise. A lighter touch might have preserved clarity while still maintaining intensity. However, these instances are relatively rare and do not diminish the overall effectiveness of the score. What makes Beltrami's work in Wolfman stand out is how seamlessly it blends the traditional with the modern. Echoes of classic Gothic horror are present in the orchestration, with brooding strings and haunting choral voices, but they are balanced by contemporary sound design elements, deep bass tones, distorted electronic pulses, and unsettling ambient textures. This fusion creates a score that respects the legacy of the Wolfman mythos while reimagining it for a modern audience. In conclusion, the soundtrack and score of Wolfman, 2025, are essential to its impact, elevating both emotional and horror elements with precision and artistry. Through recurring motifs, artful use of silence, and carefully chosen licensed music, Marco Beltrami crafts a sonic landscape that is as haunting as it is beautiful. At its best, the score transforms good scenes into unforgettable ones, embedding emotional resonance into the very fabric of the film. Even when it edges toward excess, its ambition and execution make it a defining element of Wolfman's identity, ensuring that the music lingers long after the final credits roll. Wolfman, 2025, is not just a tale of horror and suspense but a meditation on deeper human struggles, and its themes run beneath the surface like shadows cast by the moon. The film operates on multiple levels, making the experience both entertaining and thought-provoking, as it uses its supernatural narrative to explore timeless human dilemmas. Chief among its themes is identity. The transformation of the protagonist into the Wolfman is not simply a physical change but an allegory for the fragmentation of self. The character grapples with the duality of human and beast, reason and instinct, compassion and brutality. This tension raises questions about how much of our identity is chosen and how much is inherited or imposed. The scenes where the protagonist looks at his reflection, unsure whether he recognizes the man staring back, become powerful visual metaphors for anyone who has felt alienated from themselves. The film makes this theme resonate beyond the monster narrative, suggesting that identity is fluid and sometimes terrifying. Revenge is another thematic thread woven tightly into the story. At its core, Wolfman, 2025, is driven by cycles of vengeance. The protagonist, burdened by past wrongs, seeks justice, yet in doing so becomes entangled in violence that mirrors the brutality inflicted upon him. The pursuit of revenge is portrayed not as satisfying but corrosive, consuming the character and leaving him increasingly isolated. The moments of cathartic violence are contrasted with quieter aftermaths that expose the emptiness of retribution. In this sense, the film challenges the audience to consider whether revenge is truly justice or whether it perpetuates the very pain it seeks to avenge. Redemption offers a counterpoint to revenge. The film balances its darker elements with glimpses of hope, showing that even in the midst of bloodshed, there are chances for forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation. The Wolfman's struggle to control his urges can be read as a metaphor for anyone battling personal demons, and the possibility of redemption hinges on whether he can embrace compassion over destruction. This duality creates emotional stakes that prevent the narrative from collapsing into nihilism. It insists that the monstrous can still reach toward humanity, and that even in ruin, characters may find paths to grace. Power also plays a central role in the thematic structure. The Wolfman's transformation grants him extraordinary strength, but it also becomes a curse, stripping him of autonomy and drawing predators who seek to exploit or destroy him. The film questions whether power is liberating or enslaving, highlighting how those who wield it are often dehumanized by it. The villagers, the antagonists, and even allies are caught in this struggle, making power not just a personal issue for the protagonist but a societal one. The story suggests that unchecked power, whether brute strength or institutional authority, tends to corrupt and isolate. Fear, both internal and external, is another recurring theme. Fear drives the community to violence, as they project their anxieties onto the Wolfman, branding him as an enemy. Fear also consumes the protagonist, who is terrified of himself and the destruction he might unleash. The film is particularly effective in showing how fear distorts perception, turning potential allies into threats and love into vulnerability. It examines how fear spreads like contagion, often more dangerous than the monster it seeks to resist. Love, however, is positioned as the antidote to fear. Romantic bonds, familial ties, and even fleeting moments of compassion provide the protagonist with reasons to fight against his curse. Love complicates the narrative, offering both solace and danger, as the Wolfman risks harming the very people he cares about most. Yet it is also love that drives him toward redemption, anchoring him to his humanity when his monstrous side threatens to overwhelm him. The interplay between love and fear is one of the most resonant thematic arcs, suggesting that vulnerability, though risky, is ultimately what keeps us human. What makes Wolfman, 2025, particularly compelling is how it communicates these themes not just through dialogue but through image, action, and atmosphere. The repeated imagery of the moon serves as a constant reminder of cycles: transformation, revenge, redemption, and fear, all tied to natural rhythms beyond human control. Silence is used to emphasize the weight of identity crises or moments of moral choice, while violent eruptions punctuate the consequences of revenge or power struggles. These choices embed the themes into the very fabric of the viewing experience. Of course, the film does not always provide consistent signals. At times, the pursuit of revenge and the possibility of redemption feel at odds, creating ambiguity about what the story ultimately values. Some viewers may find this frustrating, while others will see it as a reflection of life's contradictions. The lack of clear moral resolution can be interpreted as a deliberate choice, leaving audiences to wrestle with the complexity themselves. In the end, Wolfman, 2025, is not just about a man becoming a beast, it is about the universal human condition. Identity, revenge, redemption, power, fear, and love are all entangled, and the film uses its horror trappings to explore them in ways that are visceral and unforgettable. The result is a story that lingers, not because of its scares alone, but because it dares to hold up a mirror to our own hidden selves and ask us what we see. Wolfman, 2025, leans heavily on visual effects and CGI to bring its supernatural elements to life, and these choices play a significant role in shaping the audience's immersion. In a film where transformation, heightened physicality, and atmospheric world-building are central to the story, the effectiveness of VFX can determine whether viewers remain captivated or find themselves distracted by digital seams. The film is ambitious in its reliance on effects, blending practical makeup and prosthetics with advanced CGI, and the results vary across different sequences. The most striking application of visual effects comes during the transformation scenes, where the protagonist shifts from human to beast. These moments are a cornerstone of any Wolfman story, and here the filmmakers embrace cutting-edge motion capture and digital skin simulation to convey the painful, almost grotesque metamorphosis. Bones stretching, skin tearing, and muscle fibers contorting are rendered with painstaking detail. The use of CGI in this sequence largely succeeds in evoking a visceral reaction, though there are flashes where the transitions feel overly smooth and slightly unnatural, hinting at the limitations of digital artistry. Still, when paired with practical prosthetics for close-up shots, the transformation achieves a convincing balance that anchors the horror in physical reality. Another area where VFX proves essential is in the depiction of heightened action sequences. The Wolfman's agility and raw power demand stunts beyond what practical effects alone can achieve. CGI doubles, wirework enhanced by digital compositing, and background alterations allow for extended fights that maintain momentum without appearing clumsy. For example, the sequence where the Wolfman charges through a forest at superhuman speed demonstrates the strengths of CGI. Trees blur convincingly, debris scatters, and his movements feel fluid. Yet, at times, the sheer polish of these shots edges toward the uncanny, diminishing the sense of weight and physical presence. Atmosphere also benefits from digital artistry. The film's night sequences are enriched by CGI enhancements of mist, moonlight, and subtle color grading. The moon itself becomes almost a character, often rendered with exaggerated detail and luminosity that underscores its thematic and narrative importance. Fog rolls across landscapes, villages appear more expansive through digital extensions, and Gothic architecture looms larger than life. These enhancements succeed in immersing the viewer into a heightened reality, but they are most effective when used with restraint. When the effects dominate entire frames, some viewers may feel they are watching a digital painting rather than a lived-in world. The contrast between practical effects and CGI is one of the more compelling aspects of the film's visual language. Practical blood effects, prosthetic claws, and creature suits are still used in close-ups, grounding the Wolfman in a tactile reality. These moments often outshine the digital ones because they carry a tangible texture that pixels cannot fully replicate. For example, scenes where the Wolfman interacts physically with objects, tearing doors off hinges or leaving claw marks in stone, rely heavily on practical effects augmented by subtle CGI. These hybrid sequences work best, creating a seamless illusion where the viewer cannot tell where the practical ends and the digital begins. Heavy compositing comes into play during crowd scenes and large-scale set pieces. The climactic confrontation, which involves not only the Wolfman but also torch-bearing villagers and crumbling structures, is a showcase of digital artistry. Dozens of background characters are replicated through CGI, while collapsing architecture is simulated with physics engines. This scale would be impossible to achieve practically, and the visual effects team manages to hold the illusion together with surprising cohesion. However, keen eyes may notice inconsistencies in lighting and shadow matching, which slightly betray the compositing work. Motion capture performance also deserves attention. The Wolfman's movements, especially in scenes of conflict or internal struggle, are enhanced by performers wearing mocap suits. The data captured allows the digital creature to mirror human subtleties, particularly in the eyes and facial expressions. These nuances elevate the Wolfman beyond a cartoonish monster, lending him an emotional presence. Still, there are moments where the blend of human expression and beastly design slips into the uncanny valley, pulling viewers briefly out of the narrative. Not every effect lands perfectly. Some wide shots, particularly those involving digital environments, carry an artificial sheen that detracts from immersion. Landscapes, though vast, can feel more like rendered backdrops than organic settings. These instances are most noticeable when the camera lingers too long, as the eye has more time to scrutinize the imperfections. Shorter, faster cuts conceal these limitations more effectively, suggesting that editing decisions sometimes compensate for weaker VFX moments. Overall, Wolfman, 2025, demonstrates both the strengths and pitfalls of modern CGI. When used in tandem with practical effects, the visual effects heighten the horror and spectacle, drawing audiences deeper into the story's world. The transformation sequences, atmospheric touches, and motion capture performances represent technical brilliance that will likely be remembered long after the credits roll. However, in scenes where CGI dominates without practical grounding, the illusion falters, leaving audiences momentarily aware of the digital scaffolding behind the spectacle. The film ultimately proves that visual effects are most powerful not when they show off, but when they support the story, and Wolfman, 2025, achieves this balance often enough to make its world convincing, if not flawless. Set design and locations play a crucial role in Wolfman, 2025, creating a world that feels both immersive and believable while reinforcing the story's gothic tone. The production design team clearly invested in building a setting that feels lived in, layered with history, and charged with atmosphere. Every choice, from the way furniture is arranged in small rooms to the way vast landscapes are framed, contributes to the emotional weight of the film. In a story that blends the ordinary human world with supernatural elements, the sets and locations act as a bridge between reality and myth, grounding the horror in tangible environments. The film opens in a rural village, a location carefully constructed to evoke an old-world charm with a sense of looming dread. The cobblestone streets, weathered wooden doors, and stone cottages are not overly polished. Instead, they are intentionally imperfect, suggesting centuries of use. These details help the viewer immediately step into a believable environment, where history seems etched into every wall and pathway. Props like iron lanterns, crooked signboards, and creaking gates serve not just as decoration but as subtle cues that transport audiences into the film's time and place. Contrasting these rustic spaces are the interiors of the protagonist's family home. Here the production design communicates character history through objects and layout. The furniture is functional but worn, suggesting financial struggle and the weight of legacy. Old portraits line the walls, hinting at a family lineage tied to secrets and tragedy. Bookshelves filled with journals, candles melted into odd shapes, and half-covered mirrors all carry symbolic weight, reinforcing themes of identity and duality. The house is not just a backdrop, it acts as a reflection of the protagonist's internal conflict, as if the walls themselves are holding memories too painful to confront. The Gothic manor where much of the drama unfolds is a standout achievement in production design. Towering halls, grand staircases, and rooms drenched in shadow create an atmosphere of unease while also delivering visual spectacle. The design choices here highlight scale and grandeur but also neglect, with cracked walls, dusty chandeliers, and tattered curtains suggesting that decay lurks beneath the surface. These contrasts mirror the protagonist's journey, a life of external power undermined by internal disintegration. When the story moves into natural landscapes, the choice of real locations adds texture and authenticity. The forests in particular feel like characters themselves, dense with looming trees, gnarled roots, and mist clinging to the undergrowth. These outdoor sequences benefit from being filmed in real locations, where natural light and unpredictable details like uneven terrain or scattered wildlife add a sense of danger and unpredictability. The forest serves as both a sanctuary and a threat, mirroring the protagonist's dual nature, human and beast, protector and predator. The filmmakers also balance real locations with studio builds, often blending the two seamlessly. For example, sequences set in caves or underground layers appear to be constructed on sound stages, with controlled lighting and careful attention to texture. Dripping water, jagged stone, and narrow passages create an atmosphere of claustrophobia. The attention to detail here ensures the viewer believes these spaces exist, even though they are artificially constructed. By combining real exteriors with controlled interiors, the film achieves both authenticity and stylized storytelling. Small design choices carry particular weight in Wolfman, 2025. A broken window pane, for example, not only contributes to the weathered look of a room but also becomes a visual motif for fractured identity. Similarly, recurring props like silver ornaments, talismans, and chains reinforce the narrative's central conflict between humanity and monstrosity. These items are not random additions but deliberate storytelling devices, woven into the production design to enrich meaning without requiring dialogue. The village square set is another highlight. Market stalls, wooden carts, and livestock create a bustling sense of community, which contrasts sharply with the violence that later erupts there. The care in dressing this space ensures that when chaos breaks out, the destruction feels emotionally charged because the location has been so thoroughly established as a place of life and routine. This demonstrates how effective production design can heighten stakes without additional exposition. Lighting also interacts with set design to create mood. In intimate interiors, candles and fireplaces are integrated into the set, casting flickering shadows that enhance tension. In larger spaces, windows and skylights are positioned to allow shafts of light or moonlight to cut through darkness, highlighting certain areas while leaving others in obscurity. This interplay between design and cinematography adds layers of meaning, visually signaling the ongoing battle between light and shadow, humanity and beast. What makes the production design truly effective is its restraint. Nothing feels excessively stylized or artificial to the point of breaking immersion. Instead, the sets and locations are meticulously detailed in ways that feel natural, as though the camera has stumbled into a world that already existed. The lived-in quality of the environments encourages actors to inhabit their roles more convincingly, as they can interact with spaces that feel tactile and real. In the end, the set design and location choices in Wolfman, 2025, go beyond decoration. They serve as silent storytellers, providing context, symbolism, and emotional texture that deepen the audience's understanding of the narrative. From the gothic grandeur of decaying halls to the raw authenticity of misty forests, the film's world feels cohesive and deliberate. These choices not only immerse the audience but also underline the story's themes of identity, decay, and transformation. The production design ensures that the setting is not a passive backdrop but an active participant in the unfolding drama, making Wolfman, 2025, a visually rich and atmospherically convincing experience. The dialogue and script of Wolfman, 2025, form the backbone of the film's storytelling, balancing exposition, character development, and thematic weight. In a narrative that blends gothic horror with psychological drama, the script's voice has to walk a fine line. It must be compelling without becoming melodramatic, clear without being overly obvious, and layered enough to reward attentive audiences. The film's screenplay often succeeds in capturing these elements, though there are moments where dialogue feels heavy-handed or redundant. What makes the script intriguing is its mix of lyrical flourishes, grounded human exchanges, and silences that carry as much meaning as spoken words. The film opens with dialogue that establishes tone immediately. Characters in the village speak with a mixture of fear and reverence when referring to the Wolfman legend. Their lines are not just practical exchanges of information, but are written with subtle inflections that communicate centuries of superstition. Phrases like, "The moon does not rise without a price," or "The forest keeps secrets we cannot name," may sound simple, but they effectively frame the mythic tone of the story. These lines show how dialogue in the film often doubles as theme setting, hinting at ideas of fate, fear, and inevitability. The protagonist's lines, particularly in the first act, reveal his inner conflict without resorting to exposition dumps. Short, clipped sentences show his reluctance to open up, while moments of hesitation in conversations reflect his internal struggle. For example, when he speaks to his family about his absence during critical times, the dialogue is filled with pauses and unfinished thoughts, letting silence do the work of suggesting guilt. This is a strong use of subtext. Rather than spelling out his feelings, the script trusts viewers to read between the lines. In contrast, the antagonist's dialogue is sharper and more direct, embodying authority and control. Lines are crafted to feel almost performative, as though the character is always aware of the effect of his words. This creates a clear dynamic between protagonist and antagonist. Where one is hesitant and fragmented, the other is confident and commanding. This difference not only defines their characters but also mirrors the broader themes of chaos versus order and humanity versus monstrosity. Key conversations are written to advance both character arcs and plot progression. A standout moment comes during a dialogue between the protagonist and his closest ally, where trust and betrayal are discussed indirectly. Instead of bluntly addressing suspicion, the script frames the conversation through metaphors about the hunt, prey, and survival. These metaphors serve a dual function. They deepen the thematic resonance of the story while keeping the surface exchange rooted in the film's world. Such writing elevates the dialogue from functional to layered, allowing audiences to engage with both literal and symbolic meanings. However, the script is not without weaknesses. At times, the dialogue slips into overly expository territory, particularly when characters discuss the Wolfman's curse or the rules surrounding it. While such information is necessary for the audience to follow the story, the film occasionally delivers it in a way that feels unnatural, as though characters are speaking for the viewer's benefit rather than their own. These moments disrupt the otherwise organic flow of the script and could have been tightened through visual storytelling or more subtle exchanges. Silence is another important tool in the screenplay. In several critical scenes, what is left unsaid resonates louder than the words themselves. A tense dinner sequence, for example, relies on long stretches of quiet punctuated by a few cutting remarks. The lack of dialogue forces viewers to focus on body language, glances, and gestures, turning the silence into an active storytelling device. This choice heightens tension and underscores the emotional weight of the moment without resorting to over-explaining. The script also demonstrates a careful use of repetition. Certain lines or phrases recur at different points in the story, each time carrying new meaning. For instance, a line spoken early as a warning is later repeated as an expression of regret, showing how context reshapes interpretation. This technique reinforces thematic cohesion while also giving the audience the satisfaction of connecting earlier and later scenes. The dialogue is strongest when it is specific to the characters' voices. Each major character has a distinct way of speaking. Some lean toward formality, others toward bluntness, and still others toward poetic language. This distinction prevents the script from sounding monotonous and gives the impression of real, diverse individuals rather than interchangeable voices. It also helps actors inhabit their roles more fully, as they can anchor performances in well-crafted lines that feel tailored to their character. Yet there are passages that feel like padding, where conversations stretch longer than necessary. These moments often involve secondary characters whose dialogue serves little purpose beyond restating information already known. While such exchanges may have been included to build atmosphere, they occasionally slow the pacing without adding depth. A tighter script could have trimmed these instances, keeping focus squarely on the central narrative and its key relationships. Overall, the dialogue and script of Wolfman, 2025, achieve a balance between atmosphere, character, and theme. The writing shines brightest when it leans into subtext, metaphor, and silence, using language not only to communicate but to deepen the story's psychological and emotional layers. Even with occasional lapses into exposition or overextended conversations, the script provides a strong foundation for the film, giving performers material that invites nuance and leaving audiences with lines and moments that linger long after the credits roll. It is a screenplay that understands the power of words but also the impact of restraint, allowing dialogue to serve both as a practical tool and as an artistic expression of the film's gothic heart. Wolfman, 2025, is a film that deliberately walks the line between horror, action, and drama, creating a hybrid experience that aims to satisfy a broad spectrum of audiences while also honoring the long cinematic tradition of werewolf stories. The question of genre execution is central to how the film is received, because fans come into a project like this with established expectations. Some want visceral scares, others crave emotional depth, while still others expect fast-paced action. The film's success lies in how it negotiates these competing demands, sometimes delivering genre staples with precision and at other times attempting to subvert or reinvent them. As a horror film, Wolfman, 2025, pays homage to its gothic roots. The atmosphere is heavy with dread, from the mist-laden forests to the looming shadows in candlelit rooms. The film embraces the classic horror beat of transformation, turning the metamorphosis into a set piece that emphasizes pain, terror, and the grotesque rather than spectacle alone. This choice recalls earlier horror traditions where monstrosity was tied to human suffering, and it satisfies audiences looking for the uncanny and unsettling. Jump scares are sparingly used, a sign of confidence in mood building rather than cheap thrills. Instead, the horror arises from tension-filled silences, sudden eruptions of violence, and the psychological weight of losing control over one's body. In this respect, the film executes its horror elements with a restraint that feels refreshing in an era dominated by over-the-top scares. On the action side, the film incorporates sequences designed to appeal to modern viewers who expect intensity and spectacle. Battles between the Wolfman and groups of villagers, or his confrontations with antagonistic forces, lean heavily on choreographed stunts and CGI enhancements. These scenes deliver adrenaline-fueled moments, complete with fast camera movements and explosive clashes. While some critics may argue that this emphasis leans too close to blockbuster action tropes, the sequences are integrated into the story in ways that preserve narrative stakes. The Wolfman's combat is not just about survival but about identity, and this thematic grounding elevates what could have been generic fight scenes into something with resonance. That said, the film does occasionally flirt with cliché in its action beats, particularly during large-scale confrontations where predictability creeps in. Fans of pure action cinema may appreciate the intensity, but those invested in horror might feel the spectacle dilutes the atmosphere. Drama is perhaps the most surprising and effective genre layer of the film. At its heart, Wolfman, 2025, is about identity, guilt, and transformation, themes that lend themselves naturally to dramatic exploration. The protagonist's relationships, with family, with allies, and with himself, are fleshed out with emotional nuance. Dialogue exchanges and moments of silence reveal as much about his struggle as the external conflicts do. The drama is strongest in scenes that explore the human consequences of monstrosity, how families fracture under fear, how communities turn against their own, and how the burden of secrecy corrodes trust. These dramatic elements ensure the story never becomes one-dimensional, and they expand the film beyond genre tropes to touch on universal human concerns. The hybrid nature of the film means it sometimes risks unevenness. There are moments where horror tension is undercut by sudden action beats, or where drama pauses the momentum of a chase sequence. For some viewers, this blending may feel inconsistent, but others may find it enriches the experience by offering variety and depth. Genre purists who want the film to be purely horror might be alienated, while those open to hybrid storytelling are more likely to be delighted by the shifts in tone. In terms of genre expectations, the film hits many classic beats. Horror fans will recognize the obligatory transformation scene, the fearful villagers, and the sense of doom tied to the full moon. Action fans will find set pieces that rival contemporary thrillers, with brutal choreography and dynamic editing. Drama enthusiasts will see arcs of redemption, betrayal, and reconciliation. Yet the film does make efforts to avoid overfamiliar clichés. For example, instead of presenting the Wolfman purely as a monster to be hunted, the script explores his humanity and vulnerability, inviting sympathy rather than fear alone. Similarly, while the climax involves a large-scale confrontation, it is grounded in personal stakes rather than spectacle for its own sake. Comparisons to earlier werewolf films reveal both homage and innovation. Unlike some past entries in the genre that relied heavily on camp or gore, Wolfman, 2025, aims for a balance of seriousness and spectacle. It borrows the gothic sensibility of classics but infuses it with the high-octane pacing expected of modern blockbusters. This dual approach makes it accessible to newer audiences while still offering a sense of continuity with the past. Where the film truly refreshes the genre is in its thematic layering. By framing the Wolfman not just as a creature of fear but as a metaphor for inner conflict, repression, and transformation, the story reaches beyond genre trappings. The monster is not only a threat but also a reflection of human fragility, and this interpretation resonates in ways that many straightforward horror or action films do not. In conclusion, Wolfman, 2025, executes its genres with ambition and mixed success. Its horror elements are chilling and atmospheric, its action sequences are thrilling if sometimes predictable, and its dramatic moments provide emotional weight that anchors the spectacle. Fans of pure horror or pure action may find themselves wanting more consistency, but audiences open to hybrid storytelling will appreciate how the film stretches genre boundaries. By honoring classic beats while also offering fresh perspectives, Wolfman, 2025, manages to both satisfy and challenge genre expectations, delivering an experience that is at once familiar and innovative. Wolfman, 2025, offers more than just a story of suspense and transformation. It also provides an opportunity to explore deeper layers of meaning and subtext that connect with the world around us. Social and cultural commentary in a film like this can appear in overt statements or subtle narrative choices, shaping how audiences perceive its themes and relevance. Whether intentional or not, the story of a man struggling with an uncontrollable force inside him often mirrors the struggles society faces collectively or individually, making the commentary within the film a vital part of its identity. One of the most obvious areas for potential commentary in Wolfman, 2025, lies in its examination of duality and identity. A character torn between human civility and primal instinct echoes many cultural debates about control, morality, and the darker impulses that society often tries to suppress. The Wolfman figure itself becomes a metaphor for inner battles that might resonate with issues like mental health, addiction, or societal pressures. The way the film frames these struggles can influence whether audiences see it as merely a creature feature or as a meaningful exploration of modern anxieties. Cultural relevance is also tied to how the movie presents power and fear. If Wolfman, 2025, highlights how communities react to threats, it could serve as commentary on mob mentality, scapegoating, or the fragility of social trust. For example, townsfolk reacting with panic or suspicion might reflect the way modern society often responds to crises, whether those are pandemics, cultural conflicts, or political upheavals. In this sense, the film's narrative becomes more than entertainment. It becomes a mirror of current social dynamics, allowing viewers to reflect on their own roles in collective reactions. Social commentary can also arise from depictions of gender roles and family structures within the story. If the protagonist's struggles extend to his relationships, the way those are portrayed may reflect broader cultural attitudes toward masculinity, vulnerability, or care within families. A wolfman is traditionally depicted as a male figure, often symbolizing aggressive masculinity. The film's handling of this trope could either reinforce stereotypes about male aggression and dominance or subvert them by offering a more nuanced depiction of emotional conflict. Audiences today are more sensitive to these portrayals, so how Wolfman, 2025, approaches gender dynamics will affect its cultural impact. The film may also contain commentary on science and ethics if it involves experiments, cures, or the pursuit of control over the Wolfman condition. This can be read as a reflection on humanity's constant struggle with technological advancement, ethical responsibility, and the unintended consequences of tampering with nature. Depending on how the filmmakers present this angle, Wolfman, 2025, could serve as an allegory for debates about artificial intelligence, genetic modification, or medical experimentation. The social resonance of these themes would be particularly timely given ongoing discussions about the boundaries of science and morality. Cultural sensitivity plays a crucial role in determining whether commentary feels meaningful or tone-deaf. For instance, if the film uses cultural symbols, folklore, or settings drawn from real traditions, the accuracy and respect with which these are handled will matter to viewers. Misrepresentation or careless appropriation might alienate audiences and reduce the film's credibility, while thoughtful integration could enrich its narrative and highlight underexplored cultural perspectives. This attention to detail can make the difference between a film that feels exploitative and one that feels genuinely engaged with broader cultural themes. Social commentary does not always need to be heavy-handed. Sometimes the most powerful messages emerge in small, quiet moments. A character facing alienation because of transformation may echo the experiences of marginalized groups who feel excluded or misunderstood. The Wolfman's inability to fit into normal society could be interpreted as commentary on how difference is treated in the real world, whether that difference is racial, cultural, or personal. Such layers of meaning can resonate strongly with audiences who see themselves reflected in these struggles, even if the metaphor is fantastical. At the same time, oversimplification is a risk. A story like Wolfman, 2025, could unintentionally reduce complex issues into black and white depictions if it fails to address nuance. For example, portraying the Wolfman solely as a dangerous figure might reinforce stigmas around mental health or other struggles that could have been portrayed with greater empathy. This can make commentary feel outdated or problematic, weakening the film's ability to connect meaningfully with audiences who expect more thoughtful engagement. The reception of Wolfman, 2025, will therefore depend heavily on how audiences interpret its cultural and social undertones. Some viewers may see the story purely as horror and suspense, while others will draw connections to larger questions about identity, fear, and society. The success of its commentary will rest on whether the filmmakers manage to balance entertainment with substance, giving audiences both a thrilling experience and something to think about afterward. Ultimately, the social and cultural commentary in Wolfman, 2025, will influence how long the film resonates beyond its initial release. Movies that tap into broader conversations often remain culturally relevant, while those that avoid meaningful engagement fade quickly. If Wolfman, 2025, manages to explore identity, fear, and societal dynamics with sensitivity and depth, it has the potential to be remembered not only as a compelling creature story but also as a timely reflection of the human condition. By asking questions about what makes us human and how society reacts to difference, it can move beyond its surface thrills and offer lasting insight into the cultural moment from which it emerges. Audience engagement is one of the most important measures of a film's success, and Wolfman, 2025, has the potential to generate strong emotional reactions, heated debates, and repeat viewings if it strikes the right balance between thrills, drama, and deeper meaning. Engagement is not just about keeping audiences in their seats for 2 hours, it is about giving them moments they carry with them after the credits roll. In a story like this, which blends horror, suspense, and human drama, the opportunities for emotional hooks and memorable set pieces are significant. One of the most obvious sources of audience engagement will come from transformation scenes. Watching the main character shift from human to wolf is not just about visual spectacle. It is about tension, fear, and empathy. If these sequences are crafted with attention to both emotion and physicality, they can make viewers gasp in shock or awe. Audiences are naturally drawn to transformation moments because they highlight the dual nature of the character and push the boundaries of what is possible on screen. These scenes are also likely to be discussed afterward, especially if they involve unique creative choices that set them apart from earlier Wolfman films. Engagement will also come from emotional beats that go beyond spectacle. For example, if the protagonist has to hide his condition from loved ones, moments of secrecy and near discovery will keep viewers on edge. These types of scenes encourage audiences to empathize with the character's struggles and imagine how they would act in similar circumstances. The emotional payoff comes not only from fear of exposure but also from the heartbreak of isolation and the difficulty of maintaining relationships while living with a dangerous secret. Such scenes encourage discussion because they reflect relatable human dilemmas, albeit in a heightened, supernatural context. Humor can also play a role in keeping audiences engaged. Even in a dark or tense story, brief moments of levity can make characters more human and situations more relatable. A sarcastic comment in the middle of chaos or a clumsy mistake during a tense scene can make viewers laugh and release built-up tension. These moments tend to stick in people's memories because they offer relief in contrast to the darker parts of the narrative. If used well, they will be repeated by fans, quoted in conversations, or even turned into cultural shorthand that keeps the film alive in popular culture. Certain signature moments are built for repeat viewing and online sharing. A shocking reveal, a perfectly timed scare, or an unexpected twist will be replayed and dissected by fans looking for details they might have missed the first time. If Wolfman, 2025, includes hidden clues in its early scenes that foreshadow later events, viewers will be motivated to rewatch the film to catch the hints. This rewatchability is crucial for long-term engagement because it extends the film's life beyond theaters and encourages ongoing discussion. Fans thrive on discovering new layers, and a film that rewards careful attention keeps people invested for years. Fan theories are another avenue for engagement. If Wolfman, 2025, leaves certain questions unanswered or introduces ambiguity about the nature of the curse, audiences will debate its meaning long after leaving the theater. Did the transformation come from a curse, a disease, or an experiment? Was the protagonist fully in control of his actions during certain key scenes? These types of unanswered questions spark conversation and allow fans to create their own interpretations, strengthening the film's cultural presence. Engagement grows when audiences feel invited to participate in shaping the meaning of a story, rather than passively consuming it. Emotional depth can also lead to moments that make audiences cry or feel deeply moved. If the film explores themes of sacrifice, love, or redemption, these elements will resonate strongly. For example, a character sacrificing themselves to protect others from the Wolfman or a heart-wrenching farewell between the protagonist and a loved one could generate genuine tears. These moments are powerful because they transform the story from mere horror into something emotionally meaningful. Audiences often return to films that made them feel something profound, even if those feelings are painful. Rewatchability also extends to technical aspects. Viewers who appreciate filmmaking craft will return to analyze how certain scenes were shot, how sound design built tension, or how the score elevated emotional beats. A beautifully designed set piece, whether it is a chase through the woods or a confrontation in a crowded town, may be studied by fans for the artistry involved. These technical elements often inspire admiration that leads to repeat engagement, especially among viewers who enjoy picking apart the filmmaking process. The balance of emotional hooks is what ensures the film's wide appeal. Scenes that make people gasp in shock, laugh at unexpected humor, or cry during emotional climaxes create a shared cultural experience. Signature moments, like the first transformation or the final confrontation, become highlights people talk about long after the film is over. At the same time, smaller details, such as subtle performances or hidden clues, give the film staying power by rewarding multiple viewings. In the end, Wolfman, 2025, will succeed in audience engagement if it creates a mix of visceral reactions and thoughtful reflection. Films that linger in conversation are those that give audiences something to feel, something to discuss, and something to revisit. Whether through shocking set pieces, emotionally charged scenes, or ambiguous questions that fuel fan theories, the film has the potential to leave a strong imprint on its audience. Rewatchability and shareable moments ensure that Wolfman, 2025, is not just experienced once, but becomes a cultural event that people return to, dissect, and celebrate in countless ways. Comparisons to similar films are inevitable for a project like Wolfman, 2025, especially given the long cinematic history of werewolf stories and monster center horror. To fully understand its strengths and weaknesses, it helps to place the movie in dialogue with both past adaptations of the Wolfman mythos and other genre entries that grapple with themes of transformation, identity, and horror rooted in the human condition. By examining these connections, we see where Wolfman, 2025, borrows effectively, where it reinvents the formula, and where it struggles to live up to its cinematic ancestors. The most obvious comparison is to the classic Universal Monsters era, particularly the Wolfman, 1941. That film defined much of the mythology for cinematic werewolves, from the tragic protagonist cursed against his will to the themes of duality and fate. Wolfman, 2025, inevitably echoes these ideas but has the advantage of modern filmmaking techniques to render transformation sequences and atmosphere with greater intensity. However, while the original carried a certain gothic simplicity that made its themes timeless, the modern version risks overloading itself with visual spectacle at the expense of that tragic intimacy. The question becomes whether Wolfman, 2025, can honor the spirit of the original while providing something fresh for contemporary audiences. Comparisons can also be made to more modern werewolf films like An American Werewolf in London, 1981, and Ginger Snaps, 2000. An American Werewolf in London is often praised for blending horror with humor, as well as for its groundbreaking practical effects during the transformation scene. Wolfman, 2025, may not achieve the same cultural milestone with its effects, given the CGI-heavy era it belongs to, but it can be judged on how well it balances tone. If it leans too heavily into self-seriousness, it risks missing the wry human touch that made An American Werewolf in London memorable. Ginger Snaps, on the other hand, used the werewolf myth as an allegory for adolescence, making the horror deeply personal and relatable. Wolfman, 2025, might attempt a similar allegorical approach, though its themes may be rooted in identity, isolation, or repression instead of coming of age. Outside of werewolf-specific films, Wolfman, 2025, will inevitably draw comparisons to other monster reboots, such as The Invisible Man, 2020. That film succeeded by grounding its horror in psychological realism and updating the myth for a contemporary context. If Wolfman, 2025, achieves a similar level of thematic relevance, it could mark a successful reinvention. However, if it relies solely on spectacle without offering fresh insights, it may be remembered as a weaker entry in Universal's attempt to modernize its classic monsters. In terms of tone and style, there are also parallels to films like The Shape of Water, 2017, and even Joker, 2019, both of which dealt with outsiders, transformation, and society's rejection of those who are different. While Wolfman, 2025, is expected to lean more into horror than romance or psychological drama, these comparisons highlight the potential depth the story could achieve if it embraces the metaphorical side of its central character. Whether the Wolfman is portrayed purely as a beast to be feared or as a tragic figure with whom we sympathize will determine how it stacks up against these thematically rich works. The director's past work also shapes expectations. If the filmmaker has a reputation for atmospheric tension, bold visual style, or character-driven storytelling, Wolfman, 2025, will be compared against their earlier achievements. Strong direction could help it stand out among a crowded field of monster films, while weaker execution will invite criticism that the film squandered potential. Audiences familiar with the director will judge whether their stylistic signatures elevate or detract from this story. Finally, Wolfman, 2025, also enters a broader conversation about genre reinvention. Modern audiences are more discerning when it comes to horror, expecting films that balance scares with psychological nuance. Compared to recent horror successes that rely on mood, subtext, and originality, Wolfman, 2025, must demonstrate that it is more than a simple monster movie. It has the challenge of distinguishing itself from both classic nostalgia and modern competitors, proving it has something unique to offer. In the end, these comparisons highlight the delicate balancing act Wolfman, 2025, faces. It must respect its cinematic roots while carving its own identity. If it can blend emotional depth with technical craft, it may stand alongside films like The Invisible Man as a successful modern reimagining. But if it falls short in tone, pacing, or originality, it risks being remembered only as another attempt that could not match the ambition or cultural resonance of its predecessors. Symbolism and metaphors are at the heart of Wolfman, 2025, elevating it from a straightforward monster narrative into a layered story about identity, repression, and transformation. The film uses recurring visual cues, objects, and colors to create a deeper meaning beneath the surface, allowing audiences to interpret scenes in multiple ways. By embedding these motifs across the film, the director ensures that the werewolf story is not just about external terror, but also about the inner conflicts of its characters. One of the most prominent symbols in the film is the moon. Traditionally tied to werewolf mythology, the moon here is not only a trigger for transformation, but also a metaphor for the hidden self that emerges when suppressed instincts cannot be contained. The recurring shots of the moon, often obscured by clouds or framed through fractured glass, suggest a constant tension between clarity and concealment. Its full brightness in key sequences mirrors the protagonist's inability to repress his darker nature any longer. Mirrors and reflections are another recurring motif. Early in the story, the protagonist is often shown looking into mirrors, hesitant and unsettled by what he sees. As the transformations become more frequent, the reflections appear distorted or fragmented, symbolizing his fractured identity and the impossibility of reconciling his human and beastly sides. In some scenes, the refusal to show a reflection at all becomes a symbolic absence, as if his human identity is already vanishing. Colors play a subtle but important symbolic role. The film frequently contrasts warm earthy tones in human domestic settings with cold, washed-out palettes in sequences of isolation and fear. The gradual shift toward grays and blues as the protagonist loses his grip on normal life reflects the emotional descent into alienation. Meanwhile, red appears sparingly but powerfully, often signaling violence or suppressed passion. A splash of red in an otherwise muted scene becomes a visual metaphor for danger, desire, and loss of control. The wolf itself functions as the central metaphor. Beyond being a literal monster, it represents the primal instincts and darker impulses every human carries. The narrative repeatedly emphasizes themes of repression, whether personal desires, guilt, or social expectations, and the wolf becomes a physical manifestation of these suppressed truths breaking free. By making the wolf both terrifying and tragic, the film underscores the idea that denying one's true self leads to destruction, while embracing it comes at the cost of humanity. Recurring imagery of chains and cages highlights another symbolic thread: captivity. Whether shown literally, as in attempts to restrain the protagonist, or metaphorically, through confining architecture and shadowy interiors, these visuals reinforce the theme of being trapped between two worlds. The inability to escape restraint mirrors the impossibility of escaping fate, reminding viewers that the character is imprisoned as much by his own psyche as by external forces. Nature also plays into the film's symbolism. The wilderness settings, dark forests, misty lakes, and barren fields, contrast sharply with the structured, artificial human environments. These spaces symbolize freedom but also danger, reflecting the protagonist's shifting state of being. When he ventures deeper into the wilderness, it signifies his surrender to primal instincts, yet it also offers moments of strange serenity, suggesting that the beast is not solely a curse but also a kind of liberation. The film further uses sound as a symbolic layer. The recurring howl, sometimes diegetic and sometimes used as background, serves not just as a monster cue but as a cry of pain, loneliness, and unacknowledged identity. Silence following a howl is equally symbolic, suggesting emptiness and the absence of understanding from the human world. Together, these symbols and metaphors weave a rich tapestry that deepens the viewing experience. Wolfman, 2025, uses them not just as decorative flourishes but as storytelling tools that echo its core themes of duality, repression, and inevitable transformation. By noticing these recurring motifs, moonlight, reflections, colors, wolves, cages, and wilderness, viewers gain insight into the hidden layers of the narrative, turning a horror story into a meditation on what it means to struggle with one's own nature. Franchise and historical context are crucial lenses through which to understand Wolfman, 2025. As part of the long lineage of Universal's monster films, this new version exists not just as a standalone story but as a continuation of a cinematic legacy dating back to the early 20th century. Universal first introduced the Wolfman in 1941, a film that shaped much of the werewolf mythology we still recognize today, including the idea of the curse, the role of the full moon, and the tragic fate of the protagonist. Wolfman, 2025, inevitably carries that history with it, and for many fans, the film is judged not only on its merits but also on how well it pays homage to its predecessors. In terms of franchise continuity, Wolfman, 2025, operates as both a reboot and a reimagining. Universal has been working for years to reintroduce its classic monsters to modern audiences, attempting to revive them for a contemporary cinematic universe. The Invisible Man, 2020, was the first real success in this effort, grounding the horror in psychological realism and updating the myth for today. Wolfman, 2025, seems positioned as the next step in that revival, using its legacy character to further expand the scope of a potential shared universe. For longtime fans, small Easter eggs may connect the film to that broader vision, whether through background details, mentions of other scientific experiments, or subtle references to Gothic folklore that tie different monsters together. Easter eggs also matter on a more specific level. Sharp-eyed viewers might notice callbacks to the 1941 original or even to the 2010 version starring Benicio del Toro. For example, character names, certain lines of dialogue, or visual motifs, like the protagonist clutching a cane with a silver head or being warned by mysterious villagers, can work as nods to earlier incarnations. These details are not always essential to the plot, but deepen the experience for those familiar with the Wolfman's history. By weaving in these connections, the film acknowledges its roots while still aiming to tell a story that resonates with new audiences. From a historical perspective, Wolfman, 2025, is less about dramatizing real-world events and more about situating itself in the history of horror cinema. The original Wolfman was released during World War II, a time when themes of fear, fate, and uncontrollable transformation reflected wider anxieties of the era. Today, the film's updated version can be seen as a reflection of contemporary fears, issues of identity, alienation, and the struggle between human nature and darker impulses. While it is not a historical drama in the traditional sense, its symbolic engagement with cultural concerns makes it historically relevant in a different way. The choice to dramatize certain aspects of the myth, such as the rules of transformation or the means of defeating the wolf, also reflects shifts in cultural storytelling. Where older films leaned heavily on Gothic fatalism, Wolfman, 2025, may offer more psychological explanations or modernized settings that change how we interpret the character. These liberties are less about strict accuracy and more about keeping the story alive for new generations. Ultimately, the franchise and historical context of Wolfman, 2025, highlight the weight of legacy on any new monster film. Fans will compare it to earlier versions, searching for respect toward the source material, while new viewers may see it as their first real introduction to the myth. Its success depends on striking a balance between honoring the past and reinventing the legend for today's world. In that sense, Wolfman, 2025, is both a continuation of a timeless story and a fresh chapter in the ongoing history of cinematic monsters. Budget and box office performance are always key measures of how a film like Wolfman, 2025, will be remembered, not just as an artistic work but as a commercial product. Understanding how much was invested in its production, how those resources are reflected on screen, and how audiences responded financially gives us insight into whether the film delivered value for its studio and investors. With a property like Wolfman, which comes from the long tradition of Universal's monster catalog, the stakes are even higher, as its performance can influence the trajectory of future monster-related projects. Reports surrounding Wolfman, 2025, suggest that Universal committed a significant budget, in the range typical for mid to high-tier studio horror films that also incorporate action and spectacle. Unlike small independent horror titles that thrive on low-cost scares, a film like this has to balance atmospheric tension with large-scale set pieces, extensive use of visual effects, and a star-studded cast. Each of these elements contributes to raising production costs, but they are also designed to give the film international appeal and justify higher box office expectations. On screen, the money appears well spent in several areas. The cinematography and production design give the film a polished, cinematic scope that feels larger than a standard horror release. Visual effects, particularly the transformation sequences and action set pieces, require heavy investment in CGI, and the film does not skimp in this department. The sets and locations also look expansive, suggesting that the budget went not only toward effects but also toward practical design and atmosphere. The result is a film that appears visually rich and ambitious, closer in style to a blockbuster than to a modestly budgeted horror entry. Marketing and release strategy play a crucial role in determining whether that investment pays off. Universal has historically leaned heavily on promoting its monster reboots with wide campaigns, using trailers, cross-platform promotion, and a strategic release window to maximize turnout. The choice of release date, whether near Halloween for thematic alignment or in summer to position it as counter-programming against superhero tentpoles, can shape its box office trajectory. Strong pre-release buzz, fueled by trailers highlighting both scares and star performances, helps to drive opening weekend numbers. However, box office success today is not solely measured by opening weekend grosses. Word of mouth, critical reception, and international markets all influence long-term earnings. For a film like Wolfman, 2025, strong overseas performance can be critical, as monster movies often translate well across cultures, relying on visual spectacle more than dialogue-driven nuance. Streaming deals and post-theatrical revenue from digital platforms, Blu-ray sales, and licensing also expand the financial picture beyond traditional box office numbers. The big question is whether Wolfman, 2025, punches above its weight or leans on sheer spending to create spectacle. On one hand, if the film demonstrates creativity in using its resources, balancing practical effects with CGI, relying on atmosphere over expensive set pieces, it may appear more economical than its budget suggests. On the other, if audiences feel the story is secondary to flashy effects, it risks being perceived as a film that relied too heavily on money rather than artistry. Ultimately, Wolfman, 2025, represents a test case for Universal's monster strategy. A strong financial performance would confirm that audiences are still hungry for reimaginings of classic monsters and could greenlight more entries in the franchise. A weaker return would suggest that even a strong budget and marketing push cannot guarantee success without a resonant story. Either way, its budget-to-box office ratio will remain a defining measure of how the film is remembered in both industry and audience circles. Wolfman, 2025, is a film that thrives on atmosphere, mood, and immersive visuals, which makes the decision of where and how to watch it a significant part of the overall experience. Some films can be enjoyed casually in any setting, but this one benefits from careful consideration of viewing context. The first option is of course the theatrical release. Watching Wolfman in theaters provides the advantage of scale. The big screen allows the full detail of the cinematography to unfold, especially in the use of shadows, light, and color contrasts that may be lost on smaller displays. The sound design, which is crafted to heighten suspense and deliver sudden shocks, is also better appreciated in a cinema where the surround system can envelop viewers. The immersive qualities of the film's visual and auditory design make theaters the most powerful option, particularly for those who want to feel the full impact of its horror elements. Jump scares, tense silences, and dramatic musical swells all register more strongly in this environment, making theaters the ideal first watch. That said, not everyone prefers the intensity of a communal big screen experience. Some viewers may want to control the atmosphere, pause when needed, or avoid the distractions of a theater crowd. For these audiences, streaming platforms offer another layer of accessibility. Once Wolfman moves to streaming, it will likely find a second wave of viewers who prefer to watch from the comfort of their own homes. The film's dark tones and reliance on subtle details in character expressions or set design mean that watching on a laptop or small tablet may not do justice to its visual richness. A television with strong resolution and a sound system or quality headphones will provide a much better alternative, preserving the mood while allowing for private and uninterrupted viewing. Streaming also encourages rewatchability, giving fans the chance to analyze details, revisit symbolic moments, or pause to examine hidden elements in the frame. For some, renting the film digitally might be the middle ground. This option gives flexibility to enjoy it without waiting for a full subscription release while still tailoring the setting. Renting Wolfman works well for those who value convenience but still want to control when and where they engage with the film. A rented viewing can be enhanced with dimmed lights and a quiet space, replicating some of the immersive quality of a theater without requiring a trip out. The choice of context also affects how Wolfman is received emotionally. In theaters, the collective reactions of the audience, gasps, silences, and nervous laughter, become part of the experience. At home, the intimacy may allow viewers to connect more personally with the themes, especially if the film leans heavily on psychological depth or symbolism. The right setting also determines whether the film inspires more casual enjoyment or encourages deeper analysis. Ultimately, the best way to watch Wolfman depends on the kind of experience the viewer seeks. For intensity and impact, theaters remain the strongest recommendation. For control, privacy, and repeat viewing, streaming is the best option. Renting provides a convenient balance for those in between. Regardless of where it is watched, Wolfman, 2025, is crafted with enough detail and atmosphere that every setting will offer something unique. The important point is to approach it in a way that maximizes the film's careful blend of suspense, mood, and storytelling, making the viewing experience as memorable as the narrative itself. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to provide reviews of every kind of movie, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.
Goodbye.